Storm over Warlock by Andre Norton, Chapter 9. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by R.J. Davis. Storm over Warlock by Andre Norton, Chapter 9, One Alone. Once again, the beach was a wide expanse of shingle, drying fast under a sun hotter than any Shan had yet known on Warlock. Summer had taken a big leap forward. The Terrans worked in partial shade below a cliff overhang, not only for the protection against the sun's rays, but also as a precaution against any roving Throg air patrol. Under Thorvald's direction, the curious shell dragged from the sea, if it were a shell, and the texture as well as the general shape suggested that, was equipped with a framework to act as a stabilizing outrigger. What resulted was certainly an odd-looking craft, but one which obeyed the paddles and rode the waves easily. In the full sunlight, the outline of islands was clear-cut, red and gray rock above an aquamarine sea. The Terrans had sighted no more of the sea monsters, and the major evidence of native life along the shore was a new series of clack-clacks, roosting in cliff holes and scavenging along the sands, and various queer fish and shell things stranded in small tide pools, to the delight of the wolverines, who fished eagerly up and down the beach, ready to investigate all debris of the storm. That should serve. Thorvald tightened the last lashing, straightening up, his fist resting on his hips, to regard the craft with a measure of pride. Shan was not quite so content. He had matched a survey officer in industry, but the need for haste still eluded him. So the ship, such as it was ready. Now they would be off to explore Thorvald's Utgard. But a small and nagging doubt inside the younger man restrained his enthusiasm over such a voyage. Forktail had come out of the section of ocean which they must navigate in this very crude transport, and Shan had no desire to meet an uninjured and alert Forktail in the latter's own territory. Which island do we head for? Shan kept private his personal doubts of their success. The outmost tip of that chain was only a distant smudge lying low on the water. The largest, that one with trees. Shan whistled. Since the night of the storm, the wolverines were again more amiable to the very light discipline he tried to keep. Perhaps the fury of that elemental burst had tightened the bond between men and animals, both alien to this world. Now Taggy and his mate padded toward him in answer to his summons. But would the wolverines trust the boat? Shan dared not risk their swimming, nor would he agree to leaving them behind. Thorvald had already stored their few provisions on board, and now Shan steadied the craft against a rock which served them as a wharf while he coaxed Taggy gently. Though the wolverine protested, he at last scrambled in, to hunch at the bottom of the shell, the picture of apprehension. Togi took longer to make up her mind, and at length Shan picked her up bodily, soothing her with quiet speech and stroking hands to put her beside her mate. The shell settled under the weight of the passengers, but Thorvald's foresight concerning the use of the outrigger proved right, for the craft was seaworthy. It answered readily to the dip of their paddles as they headed in a curve, keeping the first of the islands between them and the open sea for a breakwater. From the air, Thorvald's course would have been a crooked one, for he wove back and forth between the scattered islands of the chain, using their lee calm for the protection of the canoe. About two-thirds of the group were barren rock, inhabited only by clack-clacks and creatures closer to true Terran birds in that they wore a body plumage which resembled feathers, though their heads were naked and leathery. And Shan noted the clack-clacks and the birds did not roost on the same island, each choosing their particular home, while the other species did not invade that territory. The first large-sized island they approached was crowned by trees, but it had no beach, no approach from sea level. Perhaps it would be possible to climb to the top of the cliff walls, but Thorvald did not suggest that they try it, heading on towards the next large outcrop of land and rock. Here, white lace patterned in a ring well out from the shore to mark a circle of reefs. They nosed their way patiently around the outer circumference of that threatening barrier, hunting the entrance to the lagoon. Within, there were at least two beaches with climbable access to the upper reaches inland, though Shann noted that the vegetation showing was certainly not luxuriant, the few trees within their range of vision being pallid growths, rather like those they had sighted on the fringe of the desert. Leather-headed flyers wheeled out over their canoe, coasting on outspread wings to peer down at the Terran invaders in a manner which suggested intelligent curiosity. A full flock gathered to escort them as they continued along the outer line of the reef. Thorvald impatiently dug his paddle deeper. They had explored more than half of the reef now without chancing on an entrance channel. Regular fence, Shann commented. One could begin to believe that the barrier had been deliberately reared to frustrate visitors. Hot sunshine, reflected back from the surface of the waves, burned their exposed skin, so they dared not discard their ragged clothing, and the wolverines were growing increasingly restless. Shann did not know how much longer the animals would consent to their position as passengers without raising active protest. "How about trying the next one?" he asked, knowing at the same time his companion was not in any mood to accept such a suggestion with goodwill. The officer made no reply, but continued to use his steer paddle in a fashion which spelled out his stubborn determination to find a passage. This was a personal thing now, between Ragnar Thorvald of the Terran Survey and a wall of rock, and the man's will was as strongly rooted as those water-washed stones. On the southwestern tip of the reef they discovered a possible opening. Shann eyed the narrow space between two fang-like rocks dubiously. To him that width of water lane seemed dangerously limited. The sudden slam of a wave could dash them against either of those pillars, with disastrous results before they could move to save themselves. But Thorvald pointed their blunt bow towards the passage with seeming confidence, and Shann knew that as far as the officer was concerned, this was their door to the lagoon. Thorvald might be stubborn, but he was not a fool, and his training and skill in such maneuvers was proved when the canoe rode in a rising swell in and by those rocks to gain the safety, in seconds, of the calm lagoon. Shann sighed with relief, but ventured no comment. Now they must paddle back along the inner side of the reef to locate the beaches. For fronting them on this side of the well-protected island were cliffs as formidable as those which guarded the first of the chain at which they had aimed. Shann glanced now and then over the side of the boat, hoping in those shallows to sight the seabed or some of the inhabitants of these waters. But there was no piercing that green murk. Here and there, nodules of rock projected inches or feet above the surface, awash in the wavelets, to be avoided by the voyagers. Shann's shoulders ached and burned. His muscles were unaccustomed to the steady swing of the paddles, and the fire of the sun stabbed easily through only 2 layers of ragged cloth to his skin. He ran a dry tongue over drier lips and gazed eagerly ahead in search of the first of the beaches. What was so important about this island that Thorvald had to make a landing here? The officer's stories of a native race which they might turn against the Throgs to their own advantage was thin, very thin indeed. Especially now, as Shann weighed an unsupported theory against that ache in his shoulders, the possibility of being marooned on the inhospitable shore ahead, against the 50 probable dangers he could total up with very little expenditure of effort. A small nagging doubt of Thorvald's obsession began